Okay, so chapter 3 is about triangles,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to understand triangles to understand how anxiety travels through a system, how it lights up in the system. Triangles are all about anxiety. So,
And one of the things that Bowen says is that two-person relationships are just notoriously unstable.
right.
I mean, even if you really love another person, that over time something is going to happen where chronic anxiety is going to get triggered.
Right.
And when it does, we're going to form a triangle.
And the basic place that happens is, you know, a couple falls in love, and that will destabilize. They'll look to in-laws to stabilize that. They may look to other relationships, but eventually they might have a baby.
Right.
And that is the core triangle where most of us learned how to do triangles, either do them well or not so well.
Right, and so we said some of this in one of the previous videos, but it might be helpful just to reiterate here that a triangle, the reason a triangle exists is because you and I get anxious with each other, and we're just trying to offload our anxiety. We don't like the way that feels, and so we draw a third person in, and that's just the basic way that triangles show up.
Yeah.
And so part of what I learned along the way is that that is just the way. It's like chronic anxiety just is, like gravity is. Triangles just are.
Right.
And so the goal here is not to make triangles go away.
Right.
The goal is to recognize triangles. Am I saying this right? That the goal is first to recognize when a triangle is taking place, and then the second goal is that when a triangle gets formed, is that you want to take action to not get triangled in. In other words, you want to take action to be in relationship but not take on the anxiety. So let's keep being practical.
To take a position of neutrality.
Yeah,
so you get anxious with each other and you come to me. Well, I don't go, oh, I don't want to have this conversation because I don't want to be in a triangle.
Right.
But internally what I'm going on is, so you come to me and say, you wouldn't believe what Kim did. Internally I'm going, this is a triangle. I don't want to take this anxiety on. But I want to be in connection. I want to remain connected to Tricia.
Yeah, because triangles are just neutral. As long as everybody is dealing with their own stuff,
taking responsibility for their own feelings,
for self, and staying connected to each other person in appropriate, responsible ways. That's a neutral triangle. You know, it's not something we would even comment on. We don't even notice that.
Right.
It's when it gets lit up with anxiety that we start doing what we're talking about, triangle.
Right.
It's not that the triangle didn't exist before that.
Right.
It's just now it's lit up.
Which is a way to get rid of our anxiety, or it's a way to gang up on somebody to try to get them to change.
Exactly.
Well, so one of the, Roberta Gilbert doesn't do this so much, but Ronald Richardson uses some language that's really been helpful to me when he says, so learn to recognize triangles and then to think about what are some, he calls them de-triangling moves. And he's real careful to say de-triangling doesn't mean getting out of the relationship. And so I think it might be helpful to talk about what are some de-triangling moves.
Right, right. Well, I think one place I think he talks about is the issues of boundaries.
Right, he does.
And so one of the things that help us become more differentiated is when we clarify what is us and what isn't us. What I'm responsible for and what I'm not responsible for.
So give some examples of that.
Well, the first thing is that I can use a metaphor of property boundaries. You buy a house and you do a survey. And it's real clear, this is my property and that's my neighbor's property. And so my neighbor decides to build a pool and they don't get to come over into my property to do it. That's real clear.
You don't get to go over there and tell them you can't build a pool.
Exactly, and I don't get to go over into their backyard and say, no, you can't build a pool. That's real clear for me. It's much more foggy when it comes to personal boundaries. Okay, so what does that mean? It means this is who I am, this is what I will do, this is what I won't do, this is what I believe. Getting really clear about what my beliefs are, what the guiding principles and focus of my life are, and being able to choose out of my own thought process and decision-making process rather than simply reacting because I've taken on the anxiety of someone else. When I take on the anxiety of someone else, I've got permeated boundaries. So now the pool just got moved into my backyard.
Right. I mean, that's a really great illustration. And so here's what happens to me. If you get angry, then in the world that I grew up in, that was my responsibility.
Right.
And I had to fix your anger. I had to be, do, say something that.
And I might even give that to you. You make me so angry.
Right.
And I've just handed that to you.
And so one of the detriangling moves for me has begun, and this is deeply wired in me. I grew up in a Southern Baptist subculture that taught me that when somebody gets angry, good Christians help take care of that. And so for me, the thinking process that says Ken's angry and he's responsible for that. I'm not responsible for his anger.
Right.
That's a boundary issue.
Right.
And for me, a whole lot of the boundary issues are around other people's feelings.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely, Jim. And there's a phrase, probably Ronald Richardson said it, that I'm not responsible for you. I'm not responsible for how you feel.
Right.
I'm not responsible for how you behave. I'm not responsible for how you act. But I am responsible to you. I'm responsible to love you, to be your friend, and if I'm a role as a pastor or as a husband or whatever the role is, there's a responsibility to them. And distinguishing being responsible for someone, which is not good, but rather being responsible to them, has been a real clarifying thing for me to help me define my boundaries and not get caught up in the triangle.
So I'm responsible for myself.
Right.
And that goes back to the whole idea of all boundaries in the physical world are about what belongs to who.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's an invisible property line or whether it's the walls of a prison, everything is about what belongs to who. And so the idea is I want to be able to stop and say, okay, what belongs to who in any given situation? Well, one way that might look for me is that I might say, I want to be able to say how I feel to Jim and without him getting mad. And so what I have said is I have defined myself. I've said, well, I want to be able to say what I want. That belongs to me. But I've also taken on something that doesn't belong to me, Jim's feelings. When actually Jim getting mad belongs to him. Now, what belongs to me is that I don't like it when Jim gets mad. I need to be responsible for that. But there's a significant difference between letting that belong to me and just being aware.
There's a very significant difference, and in my thinking that goes back to the original conversation about differentiation of self, is that when my feelings get all stirred up, it's actually hard for me to think what belongs to me and what belongs to you. And so sometimes I have to calm myself down before I can get there. But with practice, I can actually be in a conversation where Ken gets angry, and so let me play out the difference in me being responsible for you and being responsible to you. Being responsible for you means that I all of a sudden take on your anger. I'm all of a sudden anxious. I'm trying to figure out how to fix stuff for you and all of that. Being responsible to you might look like I can provide a safe space for you to vent. I can let you, yell and scream and cuss and discuss and do all of that stuff. And then I'm responsible to you when you've calmed down a little bit to say, so what do you think? What is your best course of action? How are you going to get in action around this? That's for me, a clear distinction between being responsible for you and being responsible to you.
What that stirs in me, Jim, also is back to the triangle thing. And that, okay, so how do I get out, or how should I behave in a triangle if I start getting drawn in? One thing is that I remain neutral, which means in my thinking, I don't pick sides. I don't suddenly start taking sides with you. Oh, well, yeah, you know what, Tricia really is that way, and I can't
did that to me the other day.
Look at what she did to me. Yeah. And so we bring our neutrality to the triangle, but we also bring our calmness. And I think that's a key throughout this. We stay connected, but we also stay calm.
And we're not just pretending to be calm.
We are
actually, calm. Because we know what belongs to us and what doesn't, we actually are calm.
Yeah, now see, when I hear you say that, I think, that's a really great thing to aspire to. But when Ken gets angry, even if he's not angry at me, I mean, I remember when Betty and I, in the early stages of marriage, we both did better about reporting anger to each other if we could start by saying, I'm really angry and I'm not angry at you.
Right.
But when you're in a relationship, I mean, so what we're saying is this is really hard. It is possible, and those are the kinds of stances that we're trying to move toward.
Right. And even if we are anxious, if we manage our own anxiety, and if we can calm ourselves, the key is we become self-regulated. We manage our own anxiety when it begins to emerge.
One of the detriangling moves, and so we've said that getting clear about boundaries is a detriangling move. We've said that trying to remain neutral and not taking sides in the triangle is a detriangling move.
Remaining calm.
Remaining calm. One of the things that's a detriangling move that Richardson also talks about is learning to ask questions. Is just learning to be curious. And so you come and you're all bent out of shape with Tricia, and so I just ask questions. So what happened? What did she mean when what do you think she meant when she said that? And my questions, just the very fact that I'm asking them, first of all, is a calm stance. And by your answering the questions, what I'm doing is I'm helping you engage your thinking process, which helps you then to begin to calm down.
Right.
And those questions actually need to end up with, and how did you respond to that? And what's happening inside of you when this happens?
Right.
You know, what happens in triangles is that you come to me about Jim, and you and I are going to spend the whole conversation talking about Jim.
Right.
We're going to diagnose him, we're going to blame him, we're going to, but it doesn't matter, but we're going to spend all our time talking about him.
Right.
That would be a less mature response.
Right.
In fact, that would actually be getting triangled in.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
Right.
But what happens is when I'm able to let you vent and then be able to ask questions that are focused on you. How
Right.
did you be? What's
Right.
going on with you?
Right.
How do you typically respond to these kinds of things? Who would you like to be the next time you see Jim? That's where there's real power.
Right. And one of the thoughts that helps me there as well, Tricia, that was stirred when you said that is, and I think of the old television series, and I can't even remember now, but Joe Friday.
Oh, yeah.
Joe Friday said, just the facts.
Just the facts.
man." And so
Yeah.
we get triangled in when we let the other person make believe.
Yeah.
And they make up stories about people's motives and and what they thought and what their intent was. And if we can ask questions that help people just stick to the facts.
Right.
This is what happened. This is what I did. This is how I behaved. We can help calm the situation and lessen the anxiety.
Anything that we can do to help the person who is trying to triangle us in, anything we can do to help them think,
Right. Exactly.
is helpful.
And so anytime a coach is working with a coachee and that coachee is talking about someone else in their life, that's a triangle.
Exactly.
And what we're talking about right now is appropriate for coaches to take on.
Right. Would you say that again? Because we're helping coaches learn, and
Yeah.
they need to understand that when they coach people, they're getting drawn into a triangle. So they need these behaviors.
Yeah, so in any faith walking coaching situation, you have two triangles that just exist already. One is the coach, the coachee, and then whoever else the coachee is talking about.
Correct.
Their church, their spouse, their kids, their coworkers, doesn't matter.
Right.
That is a triangle, just by definition. How the coach manages himself or herself in that triangle, the way we've been talking about, will in part determine how anxious, how lit up that triangle is. The coach has the power to pull down the anxiety, but let's be honest, the coach also has the power to light it up even more than it already was.
You know, another triangle that I see that exists in every coaching relationship is the triangle between the coach, the coachee, and the homework. So there's this homework out here that's a third part of the triangle.
There's all this anxiety.
There's all this anxiety. I didn't get it done. I didn't do what I said I was going to do, and that becomes a triangle. And the coach has an assignment of holding the coachee accountable for doing the homework, and not in a judgmental way, obviously, but that's part of the role.
Yeah.
And many coachees, when they get held accountable, become anxious, and what can happen is then they can You know, they can, that anxiety,
transfer that
anxiety to the
Mhm.
coach.
Well, a third place that you have just an existent triangle is the way we do coaching. You have the coach and you have two coachees.
Correct.
And one reason that a lot of our coaches push back against the way that we encourage them to do it, which is to let one coachee have half the time while the third person listens, and then to give that person half the time while this person listens. But one of the reasons for that is to keep the potential for anxious triangling down.
Right.
And so
Right.
Good.
that's there too.
So, so let's see if we can say one more time what we've said. Triangles exist. They just are like gravity. They're like chronic anxiety. The goal is not to make them go away. The goal is to learn to see them, and then to remain neutral.
To manage ourselves.
To manage ourselves so that we don't take sides, so that we don't take on the anxiety. And what we've done is we just listed several ways. And like the stuff we were talking about in the last video, we're talking about an ideal that has to be practiced over and over and over again. I mean, I can just remember a lot of experiences where, looking back on a coaching call, I got anxious and injected anxiety into the system.
Right.
Because there, you know, this person was talking about this person, and one of the things that Richardson says that's really helpful to me is that anytime you know you're in a triangle when somebody wants to talk to you about somebody else, that's just like like that's flashing lights going off. I want to tell you about this relationship. He said, if you can just learn to say to yourself, this is a triangle.
And what's funny is that some of us over-functioners, we don't even wait to be invited into triangles. We'll see two people in trouble and we'll go volunteer to be in that triangle.
So chronic anxiety exists, and we're all defined by that. Differentiation of self is a kind of a frame of reference that can help us to become more and more.
Could I jump in right there and just simply say, because there was a thought there related to the triangles and coaching, is this idea that I'm responsible for me and only me. And if I can take responsibility for myself, I'm responsible to manage my own anxiety. I'm responsible to be calm. I'm responsible for me, and I'm not responsible for anything else.
That's a perfect definition of self-differentiation.
Exactly.
And then the connected part, because we would say be defined but connected, is that I'm responsible to you.
Correct.
And so things like speak the truth in love. I hold a mirror up to you. When you hurt me, I tell you that you've hurt me. There's a lot of ways that I'm responsible to you, but I'm not responsible for you. And in the world I grew up with, I got exactly the opposite message. I'm responsible for the well-being of everybody in the world that I live in, and if they're not okay, I'm not okay.
Right.
There you go.
Right.